It's another great day on the trails, and it couldn't be more appropriate considering today's guest, IMBA Executive Director, Mountain Bike Hall of Famer, Dave Wiens. Today, Dave is probably more well known for his trail advocacy work with the International Mountain Biking Association, but in his day, Dave was a freaking pioneer on the mountain bike. Dave was racing back in the 80s and 90s. I met Dave in the 2000s at Leadville. He and his wife, Susan DiMattei, he was the freaking king of Leadville. But before that, he was on the World Cup Tour, Norba National Circuit, racing mountain bikes with all the legends. Ned Overend, Mike Closer, Rishi Graywall, John Tomac, and all the rest. Dave was definitely one of the legends I looked up to as I raced in the 80s and 90s. And today I continue to look up to his work with IMBA and advocating for trails, not just in the US, but all around the world. I'm stoked for you to get to know Dave better and the work of IMBA, so let's dive right into my conversation with Dave Wiens, International Mountain Bike Association Executive Director. Dave Wiens, welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. You are the second in your household to be welcomed by Bike Talk with Dave. I'm thrilled to have you on, talk about mountain bikes, talk about IMBA and where it's come, where it's going, and a little bit about getting to know you.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. I'm referring, of course, to your lovely bride, Susan DiMattei, who was on episode 82, and we talked about, I don't know, women and mountain biking, which was great. It was a treat to have her on and encourage everyone to hop on mountain bikes and enjoy the trails in your neighborhood or state or nation or world, I guess. Just go out mountain biking, right?
Yeah. No, she had a great time with that conversation, and I think it was fun for her to sort of relive some of those memories and talk about how meaningful mountain biking and trails has been in our lives, and so many others too, and how many more people out there we know that trails and mountain biking could positively impact.
Gosh, has trails been a part of your life? For sure, for so long. I want to begin with you. This could probably be a 5 episode conversation, but we'll try and keep it to one. But I want people to get to know you. We're certainly going to get into IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association, which you are the executive director of, and talk about IMBA's evolution in the world of trails. But who the heck is Dave Wiens? I hate to I hate to tell you this. I probably shouldn't, but I'm gonna. We had a shindig last night, and a whole bunch of people gathered around a fire, having some beers, and questions. Oh, who are you interviewing coming up? Oh, I got Dave Wiens, and just a blank look on his face. I'm like, do you not know who Dave Wiens is? No. I'm like, ah. So, who the heck is Dave Wiens? We got to change that. We got to change that. You're probably better known in 2013. What year is this? 2023 as the executive director of IMBA, but I know you as a freaking rad mountain biker.
Yeah, well, started riding mountain bikes quite a while ago. I never call myself a pioneer. I'm like a second or third generation pioneer. Those guys go back so far. But, I was just a suburban Denver kid growing up and, played Little League football and rode bicycles. That was certainly something that got me right out of the gate was the bicycle. And what it was for freedom and exploration. And I would just go. In fact, I hear a story. I don't remember this, but when I was two, apparently I just hopped on my trike and took off from our house. And my mom came out, and I was nowhere to be seen. And I had just ridden my trike, 3 or 4 blocks away to the local playground, and I was, playing on the slide or something. And so, I mean, that really, that hasn't changed a whole lot today. Getting on a bike in a new place, or even around here where I've lived, so long, there's still, rides and roads I've not explored. And, I'll get on my bike and I'll go out and see what I can find. So that piece hasn't changed. And that was that was whatever tricycle that was. That was a bike with training wheels. I vividly remember my dad taking the training wheels off, getting that first bike when I was 6, riding that bike for a while, and then a Schwinn Varsity. Rode a Schwinn Varsity all over suburban Denver. First gear, fifth gear, 10th gear. It was might as well have been a 3-speed rather than a 10-speed. Those brake levers up on the tops that we all like to ride on, and then got a driver's license and put the bike away. So that kind of confirmed for me, at least for that time. It was then I was exploring from a vehicle, and I had skis and a kayak. Tried to get into mountain biking, but if you can remember that time, there weren't a lot of mountain bikes. Specialized Stump Jumper was certainly the one that everybody knew about. But for me, I was a very avid skier, and whitewater kayaker, and so I had kayaks and I had skis, and so I didn't ever have the money for a mountain bike until say 1985. Worked in a store, sporting goods store in Denver, and we sold bicycles. We sold 10 speeds primarily and BMX bikes. And the owners of the store didn't bring mountain bikes in. They said, "Oh, that's just a fad. It's not gonna keep going." But they were a specialized dealer, so they could sell specialized accessories. So through the rep, I bought a 1985 Specialized Stump Jumper on closeout, and got that, and actually moved to Jackson Hole with it for the winter to be a ski bum, and didn't really ride it there, and then went to Alaska that next summer. So the first single track mountain biking that I really did was 1986 in Alaska, in, of all places, Denali National Park, which I'm sure now those trails are all closed to bikes. At that time, they weren't closed to anything; they were just trails. And I remember having a bell on the bike. People are like, "Oh yeah, you want to put a bell on there so you don't, get eaten. You can scare the grizzlies away." And I'm riding in jeans and flannel, and but having just such a great time, riding trails. That was the thing about mountain biking, I think, that hooked all of us in. You could go out on a gravel road or some bike path and like, oh, this is pretty cool. But as soon as you got on a single track trail that had the sort of the sweeping turns, the undulations, the challenges of rocks and roots and ruts, challenging ups, challenging downs, we were all pretty hooked into that pretty quickly. Even though, compared to today, those bikes were pretty awful. They were pretty amazing at that time.
You could definitely go about anywhere. You just, like you said, there weren't trails that were designated open for mountain. They were just trails, and you just went down them. I remember getting lost in the jungle along the freaking Des Moines River, like a mile from my house, and I could have been 1,000 miles away, but exploring through the. I just remember lush green branches, like crawling through sticks and just exploring, and it was awesome. And that bike could go anywhere. My first mountain bike was a kind of clunker era 1969 Schwinn Tornado that I put a 5-speed derailleur on, and I still have that bike today. But that was my first mountain bike, was an old clunker era, and then I got a then I got a giant iguana, which a quick story about that. I worked in a bike shop and we sold giants, and we put on the marquee out front on the sign, "Come see our giant iguana." We literally had people come into the store looking for a giant iguana, and they were so disappointed that it was a bike. But that was my second mountain bike, and I rode that for a long time as well. But yeah, they were just a ticket to get beyond the boundaries that your feet could take you.
Yeah, yeah, and in my mind, at that time, I equated mountain biking with backpacking. It wasn't. I
Mm.
never really did equate it with just going for sort of quick rides near where you live to go for a ride. It was somehow this must be something for going into the backcountry on a multi-day trip, and it was probably 1987 that I had some paperboy baskets for my Schwinn Varsity, the big steel baskets that went on the back like panniers. I fashioned those onto. No, no, this is 80. This is 83 because it was a. I
Oh,
did have kind of another mountain bike. It was a beach cruiser. It was terrible. Had side pull brakes. Anyway, I did try mountain biking on that. It didn't work very well, but I went on a bike packing trip in 83 or 84, where I loaded this basket up with all my backpacking stuff, and so all the weight was in the back. I picked a trail near Steamboat that was just terribly steep. I had to push the trail up. I'm wearing again jeans and a flannel and my kayaking helmet. Push this bike all the way up this trail. Finally, it flattens out. I get on the single track and I'm going along, and it's just amazing. But if I hit a little rock or a root, the front end would just kind of float because there was so much weight in the back. And then it was just phenomenal. And within, I don't know, a quarter of a mile, the entire rear derailleur just broke, and I was done. I camped right there, and I went out the next day, but I couldn't even lower my seat because it had a quick release. And I switched that out for a little BMX Allen. Didn't have a tool with me, so I couldn't even lower the seat to kind of ride with my feet down, and so I just bombed down these and crash, and these hikers coming up are just looking at me like, where did planet did this guy come from? Um, but yeah, eventually, and then I didn't go bikepacking again until 2020. So yeah, what I thought maybe this bike was all about initially, obviously left the building for decades. But bikepacking is another thing that I think is really cool, and I'm very passionate about, even though I don't get to do it very much.
It is super cool and definitely a cool segment of that you can do on mountain bikes. But you pinned a number on instead. I want to say mid to late 80s, you began racing the Norba circuit and got pretty good.
Yeah, so the in Alaska actually, I did a couple mountain bike races in Mountain Bikers of Alaska, the Mountain Bike Association of Alaska (MBAA), and I just heard about a couple races at these Nordic areas and went and did them and had a great time. I think I was they had two races, an 8K and a 16K, and they had that format for both of these races on different weekends. And we all did both races, and I remember I think I got third all three races, but it was really fun. It was super intense, and I liked that about it. And it was hard, the physical part. So that was sort of, I think, maybe my first bite of mountain bike racing. But living in Gunnison, and I'm putting these pieces together out of order, but I'd gone to school here from Denver in 1982 and 83, and then I'd taken some time off and moved around. And when I came back, a lot of my buddies had started racing mountain bikes. So it was really easy for me just to slot in with those guys and start going to the races. And that would have been 1987, the year after I was in Alaska. So just did some Colorado races. Really good racer here named Dave Meyer. He would load us up in a van and take us to these different races. The Mosquito Pass Challenge, a race over in the Wet Mountain Valley near Westcliff, Winter Park, and so kind of cut my teeth around here. But it just happened that when I would go to those races, usually Ned Overend was racing, Mike Closer was racing, all the pros, Rishi Graywall, John Weisenreeder, a lot of the pros that were, the best in the world at the time, because the world really was Colorado and California, happened to race in the state of Colorado. And a lot of times I started in the expert class, pros and experts would race together. So I was getting, good quality experience right from the beginning, even though that first summer I raced in the expert class. But yeah, so then you realize this Northern National thing exists, and there was a Northern National in Durango that was the first one. Actually, maybe it was the second one. And in 1988 or 89, I had my mom help me get to Atlanta to do the first Northern National, and then the second Northern National was in Durango, so I could kind of see how I stacked up at that point. And I think I was maybe in the top 10 or 15 in points after that. So went to the race in Michigan, and a racer, in addition to my mom being a good sponsor, another racer who really helped me out was Greg Herbold. Met him early on, HB, and he would sport me if I could get myself, to the airport. He would take me to the venue in the rental car, and I could sleep in his motel room. And he introduced me to the Shimano folks and different people like that. Um, and then Gunnison's program here, the bike shop, the Tune Up Bike and Ski (RIP), they sold Diamondback. So Diamondback gave them 5 bikes, and they gave them to their shop riders, and they had a shop team. So in 88, I was on that shop team. So I was riding a Diamondback, kind of 4 Diamondback in the shop. So that's how I got the relationship with Diamondback that eventually became what we called a factory ride back then, thanks to Mountain Bike Action and their connection to motocross action. They brought the whole world moto into the mountain biking world. So yeah, I was really fortunate just to be here, be with a crew that was racing bikes, and I could learn from, and then going to the races against some really high level competition, the best that was available at the time, to learn from them as well. And Ned was great. I could pick his brain. I remember picking his brain at Moab one time, and a few different times he gave me some really good advice. And so it was a very friendly scene. I mean, it was competitive, but I don't remember hardly anything that was ever overly competitive or negative. Obviously, everybody wanted to win, and you do that as try as hard as you could to do that. But once that was done, everybody was really cordial and friendly, and it was became a really good friend group as well.
Definitely some great names that you grew up with there. I can't get over the fact that you said, I'm not really a pioneer. And it's like first Norba Nationals, first this, first that. You're definitely on the front end of the pioneering spirit in the world of mountain biking for sure. Um, I mean, gosh, just think about the bikes and how they've evolved. I suppose I'm trying to think of when our shifters started to click. It was right around 87, 88, but we started with friction shifting. We had 15 speeds, eventually, not eventually, but in the 80s, like then 18 speeds, and then 21 speeds when there were seven in back. And oh my, how that has evolved. And now
Toe
they're
clips and straps, and
toe
I
clips and
remember
straps.
the bar top shifters, and then Mike Closer started to put them underneath, so they were more accessible. And Shimano was very astute because they had engineers over here, and they saw what he was doing, and so pretty soon, I think when they started to develop rapid fire, they're like, okay, it doesn't make sense for it to be up here; it should be down here. There was a race in Vail in '88 where they presented John Tomac with the first set of two finger levers, and everyone else was
Mm.
like, "Oh man!" And John Tomac, we still had those big old motorcycle levers.
Oh, they were right off a
Yeah,
motorcycle. They were the size of your two hands,
yep.
really.
And then it was
Huge, huge.
1990, maybe toward the beginning of the year, May or June, when Shimano showed us the first SPDs, and we're like, "Oh, I
Mm.
don't know, man. That Well, really? And then RockShox, 1990 and actually Greg Herbold was testing RockShox, maybe Tom Rogers in '89, and Doug Redberry and Manitou were doing some testing. Those were the two platforms at the time, and then I got on those in 1990. I went to Paul Turner's garage, which was RockShox Inc. at the time, his house. And I said, man, I just checked out the Park City Norman National course. It's going to be super rough. It's just dirt. It's going to fall apart. And I'd love to have some front suspension. And he put, RockShox RS1s on my bike. And I went to Park City, and I won that race. It was the first Norman National. And John Tomac was second with a pair of Manitous, even though he was riding drop bars at the time. Then I think because even front suspension, people are like, yeah, I don't know, kind of heavy. I'm not sure it's
Right.
going to make a difference. And after that, they had a couple examples of guys doing pretty well with those. And by the end of the year, everybody was on them. And even Ned at the World Championships in Durango had a pair of RS1s, of course, with the decals ripped off. But yeah, the technology that was happening then isn't unlike disc brakes, tubeless tires, one by dropper posters. All the it just continues to happen, which I think is what has made this sport so engaging. Now the bikes are so amazing, so fun to ride. The technology just keeps going.
Is there a favorite technological change? I mean, you've seen bikes from the clunkers to what we have today, the freaking spaceships we have today. Is there a favorite or some favorite changes that
Well,
you've had?
those four that I mentioned are I think one of the reasons that I still really enjoy mountain biking is tubeless gives us the ability to ride much lower pressure, so we have better traction, and better traction is huge. Go climbing, cornering, the whole nine. The dropper post, anybody who knows and understands a dropper post realizes what a game changer that is for descending. And then disc brakes, go back to rim brakes, and then tell me you don't want your disc brakes back. And then the one by you remember that front derailleur shift was always sketchy. I mean, you just never knew
Oh,
what
for
was going to
sure.
happen. You had to really think through that shift. And so that one maybe not as important as those other three, but it is important because not having to worry about that particular shift is really nice. And there's probably some young kids today that don't even know what I'm talking about. But shifting that front chain ring, it was either going to drop or it was going to jam unless you were really
Yep.
precise and careful and a little bit lucky. So I mean, those are the ones that I really think about. Obviously, the full suspension, but I'd take a hardtail and a dropper before I'd ride a full suspension in the high post.
Hmm. Um, that's kind of funny. Is there a technology you miss?
Um, every once in a while, and this is not really a technology, but my hands would pine for the bar ends. And I was a big bar ends guy, loved them back in the day. And Shimano even had the bar end shifter for there for a little while. That didn't last long, and now bar ends are pretty much non-existent. But I still feel that advantage. Sometimes I'll put them on my fat bike in the winter, and you can just get a little bit more comfortable hand position. You don't have to hold the bars quite as tight on a steep climb. But they're just not cool, so nobody uses them.
I do still have uh, maybe two bikes with some uh, argon uh, grips with the little nubbies that stick out the front.
Sure.
I do still have at least one, maybe two. Maybe our tandem has those, but I do love those. Um, Say for me, two peak, toe peak,
Toe peak.
toe peak. Thank you. Um, you're kind of a toe peak dude.
Yeah, yeah. I've been with the Toe Peak Ergon mountain biking team. We ride canyon bicycles. It's been 2008, so almost 15 years.
15.
15 years.
Yeah. Um, those Kirkove is an Iowa guy,
Sure.
and he came out. He showed us those grips, and I don't know, they were $32 or something for a set of grips. And I remember making fun of him. I'm like, dude, nobody's going to pay $32 for a set of stupid grips. And then I did a 24-hour race and I won a pair. They're on every bike I own now.
Yeah.
I love them. They make such a
Yeah.
difference. Having a platform for your hand, they don't fall
Yeah.
asleep. They're
Yeah,
great. They're
no, they're
awesome.
fantastic, and really, I got associated with them because in 2007 I was setting up my Leadville bike and I wanted bar ends on it, but there were no more bar ends available. But Ergon had the grips with bar ends. So Steve Bemke was the guy at the time, an old name from mountain bike racing, and he was with Ergon, and I just I got a pair of grips from him and they work great. And I didn't think much about them until I took them off and went back to a round grip, and I was like, I'd really gotten used to the platform. So I agree, they're game changers. I've got them on all my bikes, of course, and like I say, a few bikes I still have the bar ends on. I like that technology, and then that brand has come so far with not only the grips, but their saddles are phenomenal. Their packs. It's a great brand. I love being associated with those guys. They've been really good to me over the years, and they make great products. And they've got a little something for everybody. Started with the big platform grip, and they still have that, but now they've got some of the most badass downhill guys and free ride guys and girls on the circuit using their different grips in their line, and pretty good stuff.
My wife and I just put some saddlebags on our bikes, toe peak. So they make everything and
Oh yeah,
love them.
Topeak
Great,
catalog
great quality.
catalog is like those catalogs that we used to look through from Sears when we were kids around Christmas time. There's so much amazing product, whether it's tools or packs or electronics. There's a lot, and they're constantly innovating. It's a great brand.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's been a great relationship for you for, well, 15 years. That's awesome. You mentioned Leadville, and you and I, slash you and we, my wife and I, shared a starting line there. But I actually want to go back a little earlier than that. The first starting line that I know of that you and I shared was Schwamigan, 1999. That was my first Schwamigan. And I reached out to Gary Crandall to see if he could find a photo, and he's like, "No, but Dave's got a great story about that year. Be sure and ask him about his ride." So, via Gary Crandall, tell me about your 1999 Schwamigan. Did I beat you? Did you finish?
Yeah, yeah. I was second in '99 to Marty Jameson, U.S. Postal. Not fresh off of, but from the tour that summer that they had won with U.S. Postal and Lance. So I went there on my way to the World Championships, which were in Châteaudet, Switzerland. So it just kind of made sense for me to hit a race on the way the week before, and it happened to be Shawamigan. I'd always heard a lot about it, always wanted to do it, and lined up there and just started the race. And before I knew it, Marty was gone, and me and Steve Tilford were together. So and that was it. I don't know who was behind us or how far, but Steve and I rode that entire race together, and we chased and chased and chased. And every once in a while, the sight line would give us Marty, but or we'd get a split, and it was always a minute 30. We couldn't really get close to him. But what happened there was, I don't know, two-thirds of the way through the race, probably after Fire Tower, and that's a fast course. It was a fast year. It was dry. So we're flying. There's this downhill into kind of a sandy wash area, and there was a lot of debris, wood debris in this area. And Steve's on my wheel, and we're just trading poles. We're just back and forth, doing everything we can to try to get up to Marty. Um, and as soon as we hit the transition in there, my front wheel just stopped dead. And so I just flew over the bars. Tilly crashed into me. We both just went. I mean, it was a phenomenal crash because we were going fast and it was instantaneous. We were both just over the bars. We kind of pick ourselves up. Are you all right? Yeah. Are you all right? Yeah. Okay. And he gets on his bike. I get on my bike and we start going. We don't even know what happened. Or actually, when I picked up my bike, I realized what happened. I had this little root ball was wedged into my spokes, and it had just gotten picked up in my spokes and gone up and hit the shock and stopped the bike, and it was still wedged in there. So I pulled that out and I threw it down, and we get on our bikes, and I said, hold on a second, I actually want to keep that. And I went back and I got it and I stuck it in my pocket, and Tilly was
Stop it.
shaking his head like, Wings, you're a fucking idiot. I'm like,
You're
for this.
crazy.
I've got this called the Shrine, and this is perfect for the Shrine. So we're back on the gas, chasing, and never caught Marty. I think Steve flatted because it would have come down to a sprint between the two of us, and he would have cleaned my clock, no doubt. But he got a flat right toward the end, so I think I ended up rolling into second. He rolled in third. Marty was a couple minutes ahead of us. But he got such a kick out of me going back and getting that. He wrote about it in his blog once, and I remember Tilly from just from racing. He was such a big personality, such a fun guy, such a genuine guy. Really. I mean, he was unique, but he also was very much in character with the way mountain biking was at that time. Just a lot of fun people, and try to win every race we line up for, but know that we're out there trying to do that against a bunch of buddies. So yeah, I miss Tilly a lot, and he came here and raced the Growler not too many years ago. It was great to see him for that, and our paths would cross at different points along the way, along with Trudy. And big presence, very important to bicycle racing in general and bikes. And he's touched so many people in so many different aspects of cycling, and he's well remembered, but he's very well missed too.
Big time. We do miss him. I'm in Iowa, and he would come up for races here randomly. He'd just show up for a local road race because they had nothing else going on in Kansas. So he'd load the van up, and Catherine Wahlberg, and there was kind of a I don't know, Ferris wheel of people that would hop in the van with him and come up and race, and we always both loved and hated when he'd show up because he would certainly animate the race for sure. He was never content to just sit and let the race happen.
Yeah.
He made it happen.
Yeah, yeah. One more Tilly story, really quick. I forgot about this. When I was the director of the mountain sports team at Western, we have a collegiate mountain bike team. They were heading for nationals in North or South Carolina, and I get this phone call. Hey, we're in Topeka, and we hit a deer, and our headlights are broken or something. I'm like, oh we can't, what are we going to do? They had some issue they had to get fixed, and it was at night. And I called Tilly, and Tilly goes over there, and he MacGyvered whatever was broken. He MacGyvered it back together and got them on the road. So just another example of not racing, but how Tilly touched a whole van load of collegiate bike racers and kept them going towards their destination just with his ingenuity and his generosity. He didn't even think twice. He's like, oh yeah, no, I'll go out there and I'll help him out and I'll do whatever I can. And I'm sorry, I just flashed on that, but that was a great story too.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still talking about that.
Oh yeah,
Oh, you remember the night when Tilly fixed our headlights, got us to the race? Um, well, you've also crossed paths with a couple of other guys who I would say are household names, at least in the cycling world. Floyd Landis and Lance Armstrong. Leadville, you were the man. Uh, I don't think anyone's even come close to 6 wins, have they?
no, and truth be told, I never set out to do that. That just kind of happened. I was kind of out of racing at the time, but I still was, wanted to race, and it's a couple hours from here, pretty easy for me to train for that one race. And truly, I was kind of training for one race in those years, and it was that one. And I'd do the Firecracker 50 for training, and maybe one other race, but it just worked out. But now it's so much more competitive too. Not to say something about the competition that I had at the time, but there's so much more depth now. If anybody can do it, but someone's gonna have to want to do it too. But that race is, I mean, it's turned into a really big deal. I listen to some of the podcasts and read things, and I'm like, dang, Leadville's it's a much bigger deal now than it was when I was doing it, especially amongst the pros. And I guess that was kind of what my thought was at the time was, dang, this is a really compelling race. It feels like, if more good riders did it, they would enjoy this experience, not because it's a bunch of single track. It's not that, but it's a long road race on mountain bikes, essentially, with a lot of varied terrain. It's not just climbing. It's not, there's flats, there's undulations, it's not, there are some climbs, there's no question about it, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I would really I enjoyed the training for it because I felt like it checked all the different boxes: steep climbing, moderate climbs, rolling terrain. It had just flats, dead flats. You got to be able to power the flats. Um, but someone eventually will do it because that's what happens. Records get broken. But I'm just in awe of the men and women that race that thing today because it's just, and like always, I'm in awe of everybody who decides to just do that regardless of what their goals are. Because as you know, it's a hard, long day no matter what. And it's great that people still see a challenge like that and go, yeah, you know what, I think I can do that, and they line up there at Sixth and Harrison and give it a go.
It's such an appealing race for both the front end and the back end. There are people who say, I just want to finish under 12 hours and get the belt buckle. There are people who don't care about 12 hours. They just want to be able to complete
Yeah,
it no matter how long it
right.
takes. And everything in between. I want to get the big buckle. I want to beat my time from last year. Um, Whatever it is, it's a cool race that is has so much for so
Yeah,
many, which is kind of fun. 5:45. Can you even believe that? Keegan this year?
I can, just because I've been following him. I don't know Keegan, but just following him and seeing what he's done and knowing what his mindset was based on what I've heard, going into that race and how he was searching for speed from start to finish, and he's incredible. He's an amazing athlete, and he put it all together on that day, but he seems to put it all together on a lot of days. So
He does, doesn't
he's
he?
really fun to watch, and I think some of my friends they watch the tour and follow pro cycling close, and when Sepp won the Vuelta, that was awesome. But I wasn't hanging on. I just get my updates, but I really follow the Lifetime Grand Prix a lot more because I know more of the riders in there. I don't know anybody other than Sepp, and I actually kind of know a little bit some of the folks that are racing the Lifetime Grand Prix, and it's pretty compelling racing, both on the men's and women's side. So that's sort of the only place I nerd out on bike racing now is the Lifetime Grand Prix.
I honestly, I don't know if you would take credit, but and it's not just you because it was a um, kind of a group of characters that made this race what it is today, in my opinion. And that's, I mean, it really kind of changed when Landis showed up. And I want to say that was 2007.
Yeah,
Yeah, 2007. Floyd Landis coming off his quote unquote Tour de France victory. He's like, I'm gonna take on the king of Leadville, Dave Wiens, and see what I can do. And you took him.
yeah. But the truth of that story is that he didn't probably even know I was there, although we knew each other from mountain bike racing. He said he heard Lance was going to do it because
Oh,
Lance announced in the end of 2006 that he was going to do Leadville. And we have Chris Carmichael to thank for all this because it was Chris Carmichael truly that I believe blew up Leadville. Chris Carmichael doesn't get Lance in the race. Lance never talks about the race. Floyd never comes. It might not be the race it is today, but with Chris Carmichael's involvement from bringing a lot of CTS, training camp folks to Leadville for years because it was an important, coaching piece for those guys. He mentioned it to Lance. Lance became interested in it, decided to do it, said in December 2006, I'm doing the Leadville 100. Floyd said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do it too." Lance said, "Actually, I got something going on that weekend," because he didn't want to get kind of.
I remember that.
And so then, but Floyd still showed up. Had a great race with Floyd. That was probably the most intense race I ever had because it was just nip and tuck the whole way. And then Lance did come in 2008, and we had a good race that year, and I was able to beat him. And then he came back in 2009 and just crushed me.
He
And
did.
then that really, Levi came in 2010, and Todd Wells and JHK and Jeremiah Bishop, Rebecca Rush, had her string of wins, and that really kind of, I think, got the women's field going. So it would be interesting to know because I didn't do it. I don't have enough notoriety to have lifted the profile of that race, but Lance absolutely did, and so I just happened to be the guy that was there when Lance decided to show up and race, and I that
I think the compelling part of that story is you because you're, I don't know, at that when Landis showed up 3 or 4 time defending champion and hometown favorite for sure, Colorado favorite for sure, and you beat him. If Landis had just rolled off and left you 45 minutes behind, I don't think it would have been the story that it was. If Armstrong would have just rolled off and left you 45 minutes behind, I don't think it would have been the story it turned into. But you beat those guys. And I think that's really where that story begins to like bloom and bring the notoriety to Leadville. And Lance is like, I'm gonna beat that MFer. I'm coming back again. Like I got to win Leadville. Of course he did, but I feel like that's part of the story that we definitely. Those are the years we were coming. Which, by the way, I have to tell you, like D and I on tandem are crawling on our hands and knees up Columbine on the gravel road that leads to Columbine Pass or Columbine Turnaround. You're ripping down. We can literally hear you guys 2 switchbacks above us. You sound like a jet engine roaring down that gravel road. Both you and Armstrong yelled "Go Tandem" as you flew by us at 50 miles an hour or whatever, and that always stuck to with D and I. Like those guys are great dudes. Like that was awesome.
well, Dave, riding
But
a tandem in that race is off the hook. I mean, when we see tandems, and there's what usually five or six maybe, if that, it's like that's amazing to do that. That's a whole different deal. So that's very cool.
we loved it. I had to do a test run one year, and I came home, and I'm like, D and I had been doing tandem on at Schwamigan for a couple of years, and I'm like, I think Leadville would go. There's tandems there. I think we could do it. She's like, you get us a new tandem with suspension, and I'll do it. So I got on the phone right away. I got us a tandem, 6 inches of travel front and rear, and I needed every inch of those 6 inches.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, we loved it. We did it 4 times and 2 times podium, which was awesome, and 2 times great stories just to get to the finish line, if you know what I mean.
Right, right.
Sometimes it's a good story better than a place, but we definitely loved those years. But those were our same years. So you and Lance and Landis and we saw we just kept having to start further and further up the hill by that gym in Leadville, and it was because of the great racing up front that you and the other Tour de France boys brought to the table. So I feel like you have a big part in making it what it is today.
Well, it was a fun time for me. You know, it was a good challenge to know I was going to get to race against those guys, and the races themselves were fun. But as you know, from being a bike racer, the training was all of it. And you know, I trained as if Lance was going to be there in the Floyd year, and I trained as if Lance was going to be there in the first, you know, and the second Lance. I trained hard, but those were the first years I really started to train. You know, train for that race.
Hmm.
I would ride a lot in those other years, but you know, in 2007 when I knew Floyd was coming and that Lance might still be there, I dusted off the old cross country training and put together a 5 or 6 week program beginning with the Firecracker 50, and then had a lot of good miles in before that too. But took it seriously, and that was fun for me because you know I love the planning and the preparation. I think training is actually more fun than racing. The racing is the cherry on top. The training is the journey. The racing is the destination.
Yep. We always enjoyed that whole weekend out there, and like you said, it's a capstone to the season of training
Yeah,
and a celebration of great riding. I have one more question about Leadville, and I don't know if you remember. I asked you about this in a parking lot at Copper Mountain the night after the race, maybe the day after the race. You were probably like home, showered, and back in Gunnison by the time we finished. But um, coming up to Powerline, the first year with Lance, you told me a story about him looking up at that thing and asking you a bit about it. Do you remember that story?
yeah, you bet. And it just at some point as we were approaching Powerline, we weren't necessarily right at the bottom of it. It was you could tell it was on his mind, and he said, "So do you walk or do you ride Powerline?" And I said, I always walk it. I never had even tried to ride it. I would just, you know, ride it as far as I could. You know how it kind of switches back this way and then gets super steep. And then I would just
Yep.
step off and push up it. And that would be the only section that I would push, except, do you remember the North Face or the Cobra? You know, that was
Yep.
a absolutely a mandatory hike a bike. So Leadville used to have, you know, for sure that hike a bike, and it's a pretty long one. And then for me, also it was power line. I never had to get off on Columbine, but so I trained to push my bike up hills, and I was really good at it. And you can see that there's actually a video on the internet of 2008 at the Cobra, and I step off my bike. Lance shifts into his granny gear, and he keeps climbing. Eventually, spins out. His shorts catch on his seat, and he's straddling his bike, and I just go, you know, walking by him, and I've got, you know, 40, 50 meters on him at the top. That was, you know, what I call sort of a gut punch to see what he has and make him come back to me. Um, but I feel kind of the same. Like I think it might be faster to ride it, but maybe it's more efficient to push your bike up. But if you lose 3 or 4 or 5 seconds pushing, but what you know, I can stretch my back, I can stretch my legs, you know, and then I hop back on. But he didn't answer that. He said, "Do you think we'll walk or ride?" I said, "Well, I usually walk it, or I always walk it." That was it. He didn't respond. And so we get there, and if you remember that year, the traction was actually pretty good. There had been some rain, and that was it was as good as it gets. And he just never came off. But that was probably the best fitness I've had for the way I felt during the race. I had a faster time in 2010, but I just felt really good going up it. So we climbed it and then went over the top. You know, you got that little descent, and then it's not near as steep, but it's still pretty tough climbing, and it's rockier. And again, I gapped him to where I couldn't see him when I got to the top of power line. And instead of like oh, I'm going to attack and you know try to lose him here, I just kind of was cautious going down Sugarloaf, and eventually he got back on. And I think that was just telling me that maybe I was a little bit stronger than him. So in hindsight, riding it may have been a good idea for him or may not. I don't know. I don't know if he trained to push his bike as much as I did.
That was probably the first year it was ridden.
I bet there's guys, and I'm sure of it, and maybe even some ladies who have ridden it in the past. Like if you were to find all the people who've raced Leadville, you'd find I would guess you'd find several that could raise their hand and say, I actually rode Powerline. So for me, it wasn't that I couldn't do it. It was that I didn't want to do it. It was a strategic decision to step off. Now, I tried to ride it in 2009 and 2010. Neither of those years I could. I just couldn't make it. I'd get as far as I
Wow.
could, and then I'd step off and push the rest of the way. It's a tough one, and it comes so deep in the race too.
It does. Speaking from the middle of the race somewhere, I never saw anyone ride it.
Okay,
That's for sure.
well maybe not.
As an
Maybe
eyewitness. Now, I mean, there's people in front of me, 2 hours in front of me, that may have ridden it, but I never witnessed anyone riding up that thing. That was a hard, just steep and really deep ruts.
not.
Man, I'm just having nightmares of pushing that tandem up there.
Yeah.
Um, D would give me a shove here and there on some steep parts, but man, that thing was just a beast to get up. But super fun, great
Yeah,
memories,
yeah.
great memories, and super fun to see where it's come. It's such a competitive race these days, and I enjoy on this podcast talking to the guys who do it. Cole Patton and Rose Grant won it a couple of years, and it's just fun to see what it has become. And again, I give credit to you for being competitive when Landis and Armstrong showed up.
Well, thank you.
So there you go. Yep, you bet. Okay, so I hit you originally with, hey, I want to talk about IMBA and where it's come from and where it's going and its seemingly good health today. And I suppose we should get to that, huh?
Sure, sure. You bet.
Um, I have to kind of laugh because when I was talking to Susan, I stumbled over your title. I was like, is he like board like director? She's like, I think they call him executive director. And I want to clean my statement up because geez, man, you were first on the board, then you were president of the board, and now you're executive. So you've served about every role there at IMBA. Um, and I'm curious how you got there, and I can kind of see a thing. Your work in Gunnison on the trails. I can see your trail to executive director. But first of all, what is IMBA? How do you describe IMBA? What's the mission of IMBA? And what's your role there? How'd you get there?
Well, we have a mission statement and vision and values and all that, kind of typical corporate speak. But, the simplest way to think of IMBA is that, we try to do everything we can to help communities realize great trails. And trails close to home are really important. But at the same time, we don't want to lose sight of the iconic backcountry experiences that we all are probably thinking about when we're riding our trails close to home. But most of the time we're having to ride our local trails, and I've just I think a lot of advocates that started mountain biking either now or when I did or any time in between. If there weren't good trails where you lived, you knew what good trails were like and how great they would be to have. And so mountain bikers really pursued trail development anywhere that there were mountain bikers. And that was my story here. Yeah, I was a bike racer, but instead of putting my feet up, I would be out, helping out, digging in the dirt, working on the trails in the area to make the trail system around Gunnison better. And that was primarily the Hartman Rocks area. And we had the Cook brothers and some others doing work up in Crested Butte, opening that trail system up. And it was happening in Fruita, and it was happening in the UK, and it was happening in Australia and New Zealand and everywhere else that there were mountain bikes and mountain bikers. There were some folks who were digging in the dirt and improving and expanding the network of great trails. And going back a little bit for IMBA really was born out of access fights and trying to get bikes to be allowed on existing trails because there was no really very little or no trail development taking place as mountain bikes were born. It was just whatever trails happened to be out there were there. And Mount Tam, wow, these trails are great. Oh, got to get these bikes off these trails. And they did there, and they still are. Although they're making some progress, even out there in the Marin County area with bike access. But so IMBA really worked hard to get bicycles access to trails, and we're very successful in a lot of ways. So then at the same time, the trail development started happening, and IMBA became, really important and knowledgeable in sustainable trail planning and design and construction. And we were maintaining a lot of trails, and we were realizing a lot of trails weren't sustainable. They carried too much water. So IMBA and folks who worked for IMBA or with IMBA or around IMBA started to develop these techniques, rolling grade construction. Don't build a water bar, just have your trail give up the water naturally. And so then they developed Trail Solutions as part of the IMBA family that planned, designed, and built trails, and sort of spawned what is today the modern trail building industry. And if you look at a lot of the leaders in the industry, a lot of them have roots at IMBA back in the day. Cut their teeth with Rich Edwards and Joey Klein and some of those folks. And there's a ton of great expertise out there, and not all of them came through IMBA, especially now, because now it's been around for so long that you're having the opportunity for folks to get into that world in a different way. But access is still important, and when we have access challenges, we work on those. But really, communities are struggling with new trail development because it's a very long and arduous process. And IMBA can help out at any part of that process. And you've in our conversations, you've mentioned Bentonville, and Northwest Arkansas and Bentonville are getting a lot of play, and a lot of people are seeing what's happening down there, or they're getting involved in NICA, and they suddenly have a high school mountain bike team or a middle school mountain biking team. But a NICA parent is going, how come we have to drive so far to trails? How come there are no trails here? And our message is you could have trails there if you have somebody who can go through the process of helping realize trails. And that's where the 200 plus IMBA chapters and IMBA affiliated organizations have really done a lot of heavy lifting over the years. Not every organization is about new trail development, but a lot of them are. And IMBA has helped work with them at every step of the process. And the process really starts with a vision of what's possible. And if you take it from there and you move into sort of a planning phase. But what's really important is that this community engagement is really important at every step of the way. And anymore, we're seeing a few more headwinds when it comes to trail development, because there's some opposition to trails in places. Uh, but sometimes it's just because maybe it's just too mountain bike focused, and we're not taking into consideration other trail users in a community. Because as soon as you drop trails in a community of any kind, you're going to have dog walkers, you're going to have hikers, you're going to have trail runners, you're going to have consistent trail users that also like trails close to home, but they're just not mountain bikers. So what's good for us is also good for everybody else in our community too. And so, going back to the conversation you and I had earlier about, do you call your organization a mountain bike association, or do you try to make it wider and have it be a trail organization? When you do start talking about, envisioning and building a great trail system in a community, if you bring those other folks in through the community engagement process, a lot of times you're going to get the ear of the decision makers, the land managers. You're going to have more support for your project because you're considering other uses. You're not just going out and building a bunch of jump lines and flow trails, even though that's where the idea may have started. So IMBA has resources from our IMBA local program to some of our grant programs for funding for either or small projects or trail plans. Um, we've got the trail assessment, self-assessment tools, and we've got folks on our staff that can really help at any step of the process. And in putting all this together, we've identified that what we call trail champions are really important to the process. And you can probably think of, and maybe it's you or some of your buddies who were the trail champions in your area. I mean, who drove and made the things happen? Maybe not having done it all by themselves, but if it wasn't for that one person, would it have happened? And I think of the Palisade Plunge, a pretty iconic trail around Grand Junction, and it was a gentleman named Scott Wiens and Rondo, who without their vision and them going, hey guys, we could have a trail from the top of the Grand Mesa all the way to Palisades. We could do this. We can do this. Yeah, ultimately it took the county commissioners and it took, Colorado Parks and Rec and all these other folks. But without them driving it from that beginning, it never happened. So we've really identified trail champions as being a key focus for us. And if we can, everything we can do to resource, coach, and educate trail champions on the process, then they're going to be much more effective at navigating it and getting their community through it so that that vision goes all the way through and ends up with construction and stewardship at the end. How do you maintain what you just built? So we've got resources for every step of the way. Funding is a big part of that. There was a time when it was all volunteers. IMBA was saying, "Hey, don't worry, we'll plan it, we'll design it, we'll build it, we'll maintain it, we'll do all that for free. You guys don't have to do anything." Now we're saying, actually, you know what? In all these community surveys that you guys are putting out for Parks and Rec, trails are almost always landing at the very top, and that you're expecting that to be a free thing, a free amenity for your community, but you're going to build pickleball courts and you're going to build a skate park and you're going to build a swimming pool. There's a little bit of a disconnect here. So we're really trying to push natural surface trails into that hard infrastructure category that has a line item in the budget for planning, design, and construction, as well as a line item in the budget for maintenance, because now we're starting to see some of these successful communities, and we're a good example. We've got 75, 80 miles of trail adjacent to Gunnison, and that's just a little bit too much for a small band of volunteers to really maintain well. So we have a paid trail crew now, and we still do volunteer work. Volunteers are an add-on to what our paid trail crews can do, and we're seeing that in more and more places. And it could be the organization like what we're doing here, or it could be, hey, Parks and Rec, you've got you're paying staff to mow the lawns on the ball fields. You need to also pay the staff to do the trail maintenance. Plus, a lot of the maintenance now is becoming highly technical because the trails are becoming highly technical. Jump lines, flow trails, big berms. A bunch of volunteers who've never done trail work with hand tools. It just isn't that effective nor impactful. So there's a lot of elements that we're working on, and when we started, we got rid of some of the things where we felt like we had a little mission creep that had taken place before. And I say we've got I might be the executive director, and oftentimes in nonprofits that person is the leader, but we've got a CEO, Ken McNeil, and he's fantastic, and he's truly the boss. We work closely together, but in the org chart, I report to him, and I'm happy to do so. He's got a lot of experience in business. I'm more visionary, and work on the fundraising side. We're a really good team, but we had the instructor certification program at IMBA. That was really cool. National Mountain Bike Patrol. That's really cool. But those were programs that were pulling us away from our core competency, which is helping communities realize great trails, so that then that kind of programming can take place. And so we've left that to others, and we try to stay out of the programming, but work only on programs that advance trails on the ground. And if you look at our website, you can see a lot of different programs that we have. Trail Labs Foundations, which is a really cool 2-day seminar where we're either in Bentonville or we're in Cedar City, Utah, and we'll probably have those in different places where we go through this whole process and we teach community leaders, here's what you need to bring trails to your community. And people come out of that just super jazzed about what's possible, and they have the sort of the recipe for what it's going to take, even though they may still need to lean on some IMBA resources at times as we go. Trail care schools are just where we can come into a community and take anybody who's interested from your community and walk them through a very in-depth trail building and trail maintenance program. Just get very technical skills. Land manager training. We can help local land managers who may not have that trail expertise come into a community and educate land managers. Trail accelerator workshops. That's a one-on-one. That's a community engagement program where we'll come into a community and we'll do a one-day workshop. There's no field work here, but really bringing together how important all those different relationships and partnerships are to make a trail system come to life, or a trail vision. It's not just the mountain bikers digging in the dirt anymore, and putting a huge emphasis on planning now. A lot of trails around the country were designed one trail at a time. You probably can think of examples in your area, as opposed to, okay, we've got this, this parcel or these distinct parcels in a community. Let's do a bike park here. Let's do a pump track here. Let's do a place for dog walking and trail running only over here. Let's do a jump line over here. Let's do some cross country here. When you get to that point, then you can phase your build, and build it out in such a way, and then you're looking holistically at your community and what's possible. Oftentimes, it might just be one parcel. Yeah, what are we going to do with this parcel? Can we weave all of these elements into this one parcel? Other times, it's we've got different pieces that we can use for different things, and in underserved and underrepresented communities, oftentimes that don't have as much green space, we need to be a little bit sharper in our planning. So what could work here? We're going to have to maybe do a pump track and a skills loop. There's a lot of different planning elements that are so important. So we're really saying plan, plan, plan. And to that, one of our grant programs is called the Trail Accelerator Grant. And this was our realization that oftentimes a trail plan will unlock funding for the next steps in your process, which are construction typically. So a community can apply for a Trail Accelerator grant. It's a 50-50 match, so they need to come to the table with half of the money in cash. Trail plans are usually from $5,000 to $30,000. So let's just say it's a $15,000 plan total. That community comes in with $7,500. IMBA matches it with value in kind of $7,500. And at the end of the day, that community has a trail plan that's done by landscape architects and experienced trail planners that then they can go to the funders and other folks with. And we realized that $577,000 of Trail Accelerator grants that we gave out, that unlocked $12.8 million primarily in construction. So we're seeing like a
Wow.
20 times return on these dollars invested in planning, because it's really hard to get that traction when you're just explaining to someone what you're going to do. But a plan really, oh wow, we can do this. And land management agencies, they don't do anything without a plan. Parks and Rec, they're not going to build a skate park without a plan. You're not going to build pickleball without
Right.
a plan. So again, it's another step in just trying to take our world and put it in that world of hard infrastructure. And there are other programs as well. If you go to imba.com and just kind of peruse the website, you'll see a lot of different offerings, from the IMBA local program for local organizations to some of these funding programs. The Dig In is another funding program. Dig In, it's powered by Shimano, and it's more of a crowdfunding opportunity for generally smaller projects, but communities need to build a bridge, or they want to build just a single trail, or something. Maybe it's got a price tag of 10, 15, 20, even $50,000. If you raise $5,000, Shimano will match that with $5,000. And then it has national and even international reach, as we promote it on our website and in our social media. So you can get other folks, contributing to the project. And the ones that we've seen do the best also do, quite a good marketing campaign of their own. But we're seeing nice sums of money raised for smaller projects through our Dig In program, which is powered by Shimano. And there's other things as well, that IMBA's up to, but really it all has to do with creating great trails for people, and that's for economic development for communities, and it's for health and wellness for people. And the more people can get outside and be on trails, whether they're riding bicycles or running or walking, it just makes people happier and healthier and communities more prosperous. So we're all about whatever it takes to keep going down that road. And we're expanding our offerings and our resources. And yeah, you're right. IMBA kind of spiraled down. IMBA was, had some challenges. Subaru abruptly pulled out before I came on board. That sent the organization into a tailspin, and that really was, we're still trying to recover from that. A little bad PR around bicycles in wilderness and e-bikes, which now e-bikes aren't even a thing anymore, even though we got killed for it about 6 years ago, when e-bikes were still relatively they were pretty much a ghost on trails. We were talking all about them, but they weren't there. Now there's tons of e-bikes out there, and e-bikes aren't going anywhere. And we've probably all seen the stories of where someone that we know that should be on an e-bike finally got one. And we've got a friend here, and finally he's on an e-bike, and he was out there just killing himself on an analog bike and not really having much fun and not riding that much. Now he's riding all the time and having a great time. So still some challenges with technology, But no, IMBA's on really good footing now, and we're really one of the only organizations that's working on this off-road infrastructure. In a way that we're actually, in addition to putting it on the ground ourselves, we're hands-on with organizations and partners all around the country and even internationally who are putting it on the ground. So that's our measurement. We want to impact 250 communities by the year 2025, and we're well on our way to that. We've got hundreds of communities in our pipeline, and lots of people raising their hands, going, "We're in. We want trails. We read all about the Northwest Arkansas or Cedar City or one of these other places. Where do we start? Please help us." So it's an exciting time for trails, and it's an exciting time for IMBA, and a lot of good stuff going on out there.
For sure. You've answered about 18 of my questions. One of which was we've got a local organization. IMBA was instrumental in our having a single 7-mile mountain bike trail in Des Moines in, 25 years ago, 1998. The county voted to pursue this 7-mile section of trail and open it to mountain bikes. And that 7 miles has turned into about 14. And there's another trail system in town that's another dozen miles. And then there's another 6 miles at another park. And then we're developing a whole nother on the east side of Des Moines, a whole nother, I don't know, probably 10 miles of trails. And it all began with IMBA and the Trail Care Crew,
Yeah.
which was brand new. We were kicked out of a local park in 1996, September 10th, 1996. Not that I remember that day or anything. PTSD. It was a crazy hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who were all anti-mountain biking, and I was selected as the spokesperson at this uh, rave.
Oh no.
It was the county board meeting, and they were voting whether to keep the trails open or kick us out. And holy moly! Um, but so that was 96. 97 was the first Trail Care Crew, and they came right out and walked trails with us. They walked trails with the county and Army Corps of Engineers, the state DNR, the city of Des Moines, like all of the land managers in central Iowa, Trail Care Crew. I think we had them out 3 or 4 times. Instrumental in educating us, instrumental in educating our public leadership, if you will, and instrumental in us securing that first 7 miles of trail. And like you said, it was it was just a trail that was there. We didn't build it. And it is all volunteer. And I love what you said. One of the questions as we celebrate 25 years on this trail, and our organization that helps maintain all of our trails, Central Iowa Trail Association, is we became an IMBA affiliate. Is that the right word? In, I don't know, 97, 98. And we're still an affiliate. And one of the questions was, why should we be an affiliate? And I feel like you answered that by saying, look, get your municipalities, your public, whoever, whether it's a county or the city, to treat it like they would a baseball field or a tennis court or a pickleball court. Like, they resurface the tennis court once every 5, like they put a ton of money into the tennis court. They put a ton of money into the baseball fields. They put a ton of money into basketball courts and the playgrounds and the skate parks. Yet the trails are managed by volunteers. Hey, who can come out and bring your shovel? That doesn't make sense when you say it like that.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So
It's a
we need your help again.
it's a change for some communities, and there's still organizations doing great work with volunteers, and we don't want to diminish that at all. But not every community has that. A lot of communities are struggling with volunteers. Volunteer leadership is hard. I mean, it's not for everybody to have, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 100 people show up and then be able to organize them and have something productive come out of that.
Correct. You're absolutely right about that for sure.
The optics of
Um,
volunteerism are really important, but sometimes that's more like it's just that there's this many people who would be interested in volunteering their time. We don't always look at, okay, what was the product that they produced? And again, a lot of times it's great, but other times it isn't always. And you're seeing what professionals are building now, and mountain bikers demand. There's very few volunteer organizations that can really build well what mountain bikers want to ride these days.
oh, it's crazy, and you've mentioned Bentonville, and Bentonville is so paradigm changing. Again, we took over a trail that existed. We have gotten out there with a rake and a hoe and a pair of clippers, and we've crafted more single track. But gosh, Bentonville, it's professionally built. It's in the center of town. Everything is linked together. It's such a different paradigm. I've heard it described as a ski area style of town for mountain bikes, and it totally is. You've got black runs and green runs and blue runs, and they all interconnect, and you go to the center of town and then you can go anywhere. And I can't imagine that other communities are not paying attention. Is there a shift in how trails are going to be developed and presented? Or is there still space for the guys with the rake and hoe who go out and cut a mile at a time through their local woods?
Well, there's
Like,
there's
does it
still,
happen both ways?
absolutely, and there's still space for that. We would like to see those communities though have a plan, and if it's just that one trail at a time kind of thing, you're going to end up with a system that may not function all that well. Or what we've seen in the past is that mountain bikers build what they want to ride, and they build hard and harder, and that's really what happened in the '90s. Is we ended up with a lot of hard and harder trails. Right now, IMBA Trail Solutions, we can build a technical rock tech double black crazy thing that I won't even consider riding. We can build big jump lines, and we can build beginner trail. Beginner trail is really hard to build, and that's what is missing in a lot of places. Certainly, we want to see more challenging trails for skill progression, and we can do those, and those should be part of any good plan. You should have that rock tech jump lines, all that. But you also need to have some fantastic beginner trails too, family friendly greens. And what we think is a green oftentimes isn't really a green for truly a beginner mountain biker. We've got adults that have never ridden bicycles before. And then some of them are even getting put on e-bikes, to make it even a little bit more challenging. Like, here's a heavier bike that actually pedals itself, just to make it interesting. So a great system, in our opinion, has everything. It's got greens, it's got blues, it's got the variety of blacks that you want, because there's black jump lines and there's black tech lines. And that's where the planning process comes in. Then you start to put all those pieces in. Do you have a NICA team? Do you need an event venue for NICA races or trail running races or something like that? We can plan that in. Does your park get inundated by NICA practices so that in the afternoon there's just kids on mountain bikes everywhere? This is what happens in Utah and a few other places, is that trail systems get completely taken over by kids on bikes, and it's a great thing. But there are ways that you can say, hey, let's build a really great practice venue over in this part of the park, and let's save this part of the park for the general public to use during those after school hours, so that we're not monopolizing the entire park with kids on bikes. So that planning piece is so important, and it can happen with the volunteers. I mean, volunteers can follow a plan. So certainly would never want to dismiss that idea. But more and more, our organizations, I think, are becoming sort of the players of relationships and putting pieces together so that then things happen. Because you don't have to have a shovel in your hands necessarily to make things happen. And once you can kind of think about that part of it and maybe let go of a few things and let some things happen organically or through sort of a team approach, what you may end up with may not have been exactly what you had envisioned, but it might even be just a little bit better and serve a broader cross section of your community. So, we really like it heading in that direction. It doesn't mean that that clubs and organizations are any less important. It just means that some of those roles might shift into, what could be more compelling roles. And there's still going to be those opportunities to help out on the volunteer side. I don't think those will ever go away, but it's really trying to think in a different way about how we realize trails, and the planning piece, the community engagement, bringing everybody in, widening our vision so that we're not just seeing mountain biking. Now, if you have a park and they're like, we want this to be a mountain biking park, we'll go whole hog mountain biking there. But just know that if there are people living around there and there are no other trails, there's going to be a guy with a labradoodle and a latte walking up the jump line every single morning. So
For sure.
it'd be nice to give him, that nice place for him to walk his dog, and the same for other trail users. And that's where, bringing the other stakeholders into the process of community engagement is really important. And what needs to be, an important part of that is great mountain biking. Obviously, it's not, we don't want to diminish the opportunities for mountain biking. And we have some examples of this. Folks can look up Corner Canyon Trails in Draper City, Utah. They've got a great map online, over 100 miles of trail. A lot of it is multiple use, but a lot of it is directional mountain bike optimized, or hiker horse only, or bikes can go up, it can't come back down, but that trail happens to take bikes to, 3 or 4 different great bike optimized descent lines. And it's a busy trail system with lots of mountain bikes, lots of hikers, lots of trail runners, quite a few horses, and it works really well. And it's what we call a modern trail system. And that's what we're trying to promote is we need more directional trails for mountain bikes, because let's face it, we're fast. We go fast, and every once in a while we'd love to be able to ride and let go of our brakes and relax a little bit. And we can do that on directional trails. And then at the same time, there's dog walkers and runners that might like to be on a trail where they're not worried about mountain bikers. I mean, how many times have I seen this at a trailhead? All right, kids, there's mountain bikes on this trail, and they're hikers. There's mountain bikes on this trail, so if you hear a mountain biker, you got to get off the trail so you don't get run over. And we see it all the time. Hikers they're kind of on pins and needles all the time. But as soon as they get on a trail where they know they're not going to see mountain bikers, they can relax too. So we can have, those best elements of both of our worlds in the same system, in the same community. But that takes a lot of planning and collaboration and cooperation. But there's examples of it now. A lot of directional trails up in the upper Midwest. So we're just going to continue to evolve. The way we package and assemble trails, and looking at the whole community, I think, is really important too, because then you start to see where the people are and what opportunities are available, and where could you be sort of mountain bike heavy, where do you maybe want to have some trails that bikes may not be allowed on, and how do you put all those elements together in a way that works well for everybody.
I feel like it's time for phase two in our community, which is everything you just said there, the directional trails, uh, how many times I still have a bell on my bike because of the blind corners. I don't know if there's going to be a bike heading towards me or somebody walking their dog around the corner. So I'm ding, ding, ding all the time. And if it were a directional trail, lay off the brakes and roll and smile and ride.
Yeah,
And the people walking their dogs don't have to worry about it. You brought up so many great points that I feel like maybe it's time to bring Imba back in and take a look at what we have and offer some, like, hey, did you think about this? Or what if you that? Or what if you this? And it might really help to improve our trails, as opposed to just, hey, we've got these trails, let's go ride mountain bikes.
yeah, yeah. And let me bring one other element in that you and I talked about earlier, and that's the Trails Are Common Ground movement. If anybody goes to trailsarecommonground.org, IMBA pulled together trail users, walkers, runners, mountain bikers, equestrians, and traditional motorized users, and we formed this Trails Are Common Ground coalition, if you will. And there's really 3 principles, and the first one is inclusivity. Hey, let's make sure that everybody in our country has access to trails and feels safe and welcome on trails, regardless of how they're using trails. The second part is responsible use, basically trail etiquette. And we decided, let's lead with kindness. If you're going to be one thing out there, just be kind. If you're kind, that'll probably take care of a lot of the issues you may have. Secondly, be aware. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't just tune out there and think you're the only person out there. Pay attention, look around a little bit. If you're riding a horse or a mountain bike or a moto, you want to be a little bit cautious. If you're trail running, and mainly for blind corners. I mean, blind corners are are an 800-pound gorilla in the room of trails. So a little bit of caution doesn't hurt. And then the third part of the responsible use is knowledge. Over time, continue to add to your knowledge of what to do in different situations as you're riding your mountain bike or your e-bike or walking or running or riding a horse or whatever. Do you know what to do if you come upon a pack stock, a trail ride of 18 horses going the same direction you're going up a narrow single track? What do you do in that situation? I mean, that's an extreme example, but let's always be building our knowledge and never feel like we've arrived. And then the third pillar is that trail modernization piece, which we just talked about a lot. And that's just how can we assemble trails in a way that works better for all trail users so that we actually increase the carrying capacity of a system, lower the opportunities for conflict within the system, and increase user satisfaction by all users, regardless of how they're using the trails, whether they're mountain biking, riding a horse, trail running, whatever they're doing. They're going away going, I just had a great time on the trails, because we want people going back. We want people to be happier and healthier. It's going to make our country a better place. If more people in our country who are all, sort of fractionalized, if they all went out on trails, and I think we'd all start getting along better. So maybe
Trails are a common ground.
trailsarecommonground.org. Check it out.
Yeah, I love it. I love the work you're doing, and I love, I don't know, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Love talking about the old days. Ah, man, I sound so old when I talk like that, but I mean, been around a long time, right? We are. Yep. But still riding, and loving life for sure. You're still on a bike and still jamming out.
Oh yeah, no, I ride any chance I get, and still enjoy hiking and skiing in the wintertime, and fat biking around here. You guys have great fat biking, I know, in the upper Midwest. We've gotten into that the last few years, and there's some grooming that takes place that makes it really fun. And that's the one thing. It seems like I talked to a lot of people that like, oh yeah, my back hurts and this injury, that injury, but if I get on my bike, I'm good. And I feel kind of that way too. I feel pretty old, and then I get on my bike, I'm like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good. So no, we're gonna keep riding. Susan and I ride together a lot, and we'll just keep doing it. It's fall here now, so we never know how long we can ride, and then we have to transition to all different kinds of skiing. But you kind of know that drill where you're living too. It's not
no doubt
a bad switch.
Yeah, it is not a bad switch. I feel like skiing, and I've said it on this podcast many times before, but downhill skiing and mountain biking give me the same joyous feelings. Yeah. I just love that flow and the freedom and sometimes the speed, and
yeah,
I love it.
They're similar. Rolling over the earth and sliding over the earth, they kind of have a similar feel, and the wind in the hair and all that, or on the helmet, whatever it is.
Yep, they do. And you do still have some hair. I do not. It's no wind through the hair. Well, Dave, I didn't even talk about you're in the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame, Mountain Bike Hall of Famer, IMBA Executive Director, just all around good guy. When you said just be kind, I think you summed up who you are as a human being. So always appreciated knowing you from Leadville, and your kindness to take time on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been great to catch up with you again, and thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, for sure.
Gosh, what an honor to talk to Dave. His passion for building strong, healthy, happy communities through trails is so obvious. We're fortunate to have him working so hard so we can get out and ride, run, and hike, not only in beautiful parks around the world, but close to home as well. Be sure and connect with the International Mountain Bike Association at imba.com and check out the new organization, Trails Are Common Ground, at trailsarecommonground.org. And you can help make our trails a happier place for everyone. Speaking of our happy place, the Core 4 is hoping you have a happy day next August. Check it out. Who's ready for some Core 4 news? After a huge spike in riders and a super thank you to everyone for coming out this year, these guys jumped right back into the fire. It's no surface untouched again for 2024 because Core 4 24 has a sweet sound to it, no doubt. New routes, new distances, and a new you. That's right, y'all. They are mixing it up with more surprises and delights. New for 24 is the Core 40 distance. Just a bump up from the 20 mile and still has all the farmscapes and B roads and champagne gravel you'd expect from the folks at Core 4, just without the single track. They're telling us 60 is the new 50, miles that is. It's a no-surfaced, untouched, podium-eligible route with all the cats in addition to their marquee 100-mile event. It's the perfect blend of competition and community. We want Core 4 to be on your event calendar for 2024. Jump on Bike Reg today, snag your spot before this event reaches its cap. Come ride the wave and get more bodies on bikes. It's blazing hot action every year, and they'll keep the fire stoked all winter long with the 20, 40, 60, or 100-mile route. Core 424 has something for everyone. It's time for the next time. Let's go! Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's show, I would love it if you would rate and review on your favorite podcast platform, and give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook as well. And of course, now we are on YouTube. If you really love the show, I would welcome you to support it financially. Just look for Bike Talk with Dave at buymeacoffee.com. Drop a few coins in the cup, and when you do, I will send you a sticker. And remember, every episode is available on your computer or other device at biketalk.bike. I hope you have a great week, and remember that nothing compares to the simple pleasure of riding a bicycle.